April 1967. The air over Da Nang hummed with a tension that clung to the skin like wet canvas. Captain Jonathan Reef Hall, Air Force test pilot temporarily reassigned from Edwards, stepped off the transport plane and felt the heat of Vietnam hit him like exhaust. He had received a sealed message 2 weeks earlier. Report to 6,250th Combat Support Group. Special Evaluation Assignment. Level Omega Clearance. No other explanation. But even before he reached the shabby wooden operations hut with its peeling paint and sandbags stacked like drunken soldiers, he sensed this wasn't another advisory mission. The MPs at the gate had scanned his badge twice, then once more just to be sure. Whatever they were protecting wasn't a flight schedule. Inside the dimly lit structure, a colonel he'd never met slid a folder across the desk. The cover read Project Iron Lantern in aggressive red block letters. Captain Hall. The colonel said without ceremony, "We've acquired something rare. Something we didn't expect to get intact. Something flying out of Kep Air Base was brought down with minimal structural damage, and the North Vietnamese didn't have time to destroy it." He opened the folder. A black and white photo lay inside. A small jet, compact, strange-looking, silver gray, its intake a wide, hungry mouth, like a lamprey with wings. The tail bore a red star, partly scorched. Hall recognized the shape instantly. A Chinese-built J-6, derived from the Soviet MiG-19 Farmer. A jet that American pilots had whispered about since 1965, the kind that flashed in and out of radar like a ghost because of its primitive electronics. The kind that could turn inside almost anything the U.S. had in theater. This one's airframe survived, the colonel continued. She's beat up, but flyable. Beijing denies everything. Moscow denies everything. Hanoi is furious, and we want answers. You're going up in it. Hall blinked. Sir, no American pilot has flown a J-6. That's why you're here. The hangar was a corrugated metal furnace. There were no signs, no markings, no personnel who weren't handpicked. Under a row of floodlights stood the jet, stubby, crude, almost angry-looking. Its panels were hammered together like a farm tool. It sat low to the ground, with twin engines that looked like repurposed steel drums. One mechanic tapped the fuselage. Metal dust flaked off. Hall walked around it, slow, deliberate. Every rivet, every panel line seemed to whisper a design philosophy foreign to him. American jets were like symphonies, harmonized hydraulics, redundant electronics, careful ergonomics. This thing was a drum solo at 3 a.m. raw. Loud, unapologetic. The cockpit was worse. Or better. Depends who you asked. For Hall, trained on the XF-109 and the endlessly complicated F-111 test platforms, the J-6 felt like a time capsule. No computer-assisted displays. No mission management panels. No redundant gauges. Hell, no readable ones. Cyrillic translations were sloppily added in pencil. The seat cushion felt like it had been filled with old newspapers. And yet, there was purpose. Everything needed to kill another aircraft was placed front and center. Nothing else mattered. Chicoms kept what worked and threw out anything fancy, one tech muttered. Doesn't look like it could keep up with our Phantoms, another scoffed. But Hall ignored them. He pressed a palm flat against the cold metal, and a shiver ran through him. Not from temperature, but from intuition. He felt the same way he had the first time he saw a mountaineer pickaxe, a primitive tool, but devastating in the right hands. That night, he studied the manual, what little the intelligence teams had managed to translate. The text was barely 30 pages. Meanwhile, the F-4 Phantoms documentation required an entire filing cabinet and 3 specialists to interpret. The J-6 manual was more like an instruction sheet for repairing a pump. Fuel flow, minimal checks. Engine start, 3 steps. Weapons, 2 switches. Emergency system, avoid emergencies. Hall chuckled despite himself. Hell of a design doctrine, he whispered. But he could also feel something tightening in his chest. American pilots were dying over Hanoi and Haiphong. Phantom crews were being ambushed, sometimes by small formations of fighters nobody even reported seeing. The intel guys kept saying the MiG-21 was the real threat, but the J-6, older and cruder, was showing up in gun-range kills. Kills that shouldn't have been possible. Hall traced a finger across a schematic of the jet's control surfaces. Simple, he murmured. Simple and lethal. The next morning, The colonel gave the order. You're cleared for flight. No ceremony. No camera crews. Just Hall, a jumpsuit stained from the previous pilot who had died ejecting from an F-105, and a battered Chinese-made jet that looked like it had survived a bar fight. As Hall climbed the ladder, every instinct told him this aircraft wasn't a machine, it was a compromise. Designed for mass production, mass deployment, mass sacrifice. It was built so a pilot with 120 flight hours could defend an airfield without thinking. Built to accelerate hard, hit with guns, and retreat. The canopy slammed shut with a metallic thunk. No seal hissed. No compression. It simply closed, like a toolbox lid. Engines spooled. The entire frame rattled as if it wanted to shake itself apart. The tower gave the all-clear. Lantern 1, runway 31. You're free. Hall eased the throttle forward. The engines didn't ease. They lunged. The jet ripped down the runway like a torpedo fired from a submarine. Raw thrust overwhelming any pretense of aerodynamics. Hall felt his ribs compress as if the aircraft were challenging him. Keep up, or else. With no warning, the J-6 leapt into the sky. Not climbed. Leapt. And Hall understood immediately why pilots feared aircraft like this one. The J-6 wasn't balanced. It wasn't polite. It was a cornered animal. Fast, violent, unpredictable. It punched its way through the tropical haze, its controls vibrating, its engines emitting a roar unsoftened by sophistication. He stabilized at 10,000 feet. The horizon shimmered, mottled by heat and monsoon humidity. He whispered into his recorder. Initial impression, this aircraft is not a fighter. It's a fist. He performed a roll. The J-6 obeyed instantly, too instantly. At high speed, the controls felt like they were wired directly to his spine. No dampening. No delay. At low speed, though, the jet shuddered, complaining, threatening to depart controlled flight if handled like a Western aircraft. This plane doesn't forgive mistakes, Hall muttered. But if you don't make mistakes, she's a killer. He pushed it into a climb. The twin turbojets screamed. The nose lifted like a hound catching a scent. Even as sweat stung his eyes, Hall felt something unfamiliar. Respect. Yes, the J-6 was dangerous. But not because it was better. Because it was enough. Enough to be maintained by tired mechanics wearing sandals. Enough to launch from a cratered runway. Enough to ambush phantoms already juggling radar, missiles, and SAM evasion. Enough to survive the war the North was actually fighting, not the war American planners imagined. Hall leveled off at 28,000 feet, staring into a sky that looked too peaceful for a place drowning in fire below. This jet, he whispered, was built to win ugly. When Hall returned to the ground, the J-6 landed with all the grace of a refrigerator being pushed off a truck. But it landed, and mechanics swarmed it, arguing, poking, laughing, because the damn thing had flown. Hall climbed out, hands shaking, adrenaline still humming. The colonel approached. Well, Hall wiped sweat from his brow. It's not a machine, he said quietly. It's a strategy. The colonel narrowed his eyes. Explain. Hall looked back at the battered jet. They build fighters to survive chaos. We build fighters to prevent chaos. But war doesn't care what we intend. And that's why they're giving our boys hell up north. For the first time, the colonel's face softened. We need a full report. You'll get it, Hall said. But you're not going to like it. 3 days later, Hall sat alone in a prefab metal office overlooking the runway. A storm rolled in from the South China Sea, turning the air into a deep, metallic blue. Thunder grumbled in the distance. The J-6 sat outside, chained down, glistening wet like an animal caught in the rain. He was supposed to be writing the report. Instead, he stared at a stack of mission photographs spread across the desk. F for exploded mid-turn. Thunder Chief disappearing in smoke. Gun camera still frames. The brief, blurry silhouette of a J-6 behind an American jet, cannons firing. Most kills were at close range, far closer than anyone anticipated. That troubled Hall. It meant the North Vietnamese and their Chinese advisors were dragging fights into knife distance and winning. He lifted one photo. A phantom with its tail sheared off, spiraling downward like a burning leaf. The caption read, "Pilot did not eject." Hall closed his eyes and took a slow breath. Someone knocked. A tall, red-haired major leaned inside. "You're Hall, right?" "Reef Hall. That's what my name tag claims. Name's Collins. Flew with the 390th before they sent me here for technical reassignment. His tone made the quotation marks sharp. Heard you took the Chinese tin can into the air. Hall nodded slowly. Collins stepped fully inside, shutting the door behind him. Something in his expression was coiled, anger mixed with something darker. My wingman, Collins said, was killed by one of those pieces of junk. J-6. Came out of nowhere. One burst. That was it. Hall didn't speak. You know what command said? Collins continued. Pilot error. As if Dave didn't know his own turn radius. Hall swallowed. I'm sorry. Collins stared at the rain sliding down the window. Just tell me this, he said. How did it feel? Up there. Against you? Hall considered that for a long, waited moment. Like being in a fistfight with someone who doesn't care if they break their own hand, he finally said. Collins let out a soft, humorless laugh. That's what I thought you'd say. He left without another word. Over the next week, Hall flew the J-6 4 more times. Each flight revealed another piece of the puzzle, another fragment of the aircraft's strange brilliance. On the second flight, he tested its high G turns. The G-meter maxed out so fast that his vision tunneled, and sweat soaked through his gloves. The aircraft didn't turn so much as snap into a new orientation. It was like wrestling a wild dog. If you let it lead, it tore away from you. But if you forced it, it bit back. On the third flight, he tested slow-speed handling. The wings buffeted violently. The nose wandered. The engines howled unevenly, like two drunk brothers arguing. But even then, it would not stall easily. It shuddered, complained, threatened, but held. On the fourth flight, he simulated a dogfight. No fancy radar. No advanced missiles. Just instinct. Hall found himself smiling behind the mask. Against an F-4 or F-105, the J-6 would be unpredictable, chaotic, and lethal in the first turning seconds, provided the pilot had the nerve to ride the turbulence. This isn't a fighter, he told the recorder. This is a disposable scalpel. That afternoon, intelligence officers arrived. Their uniforms were crisp, untouched by monsoon mud. They asked questions that sounded like statements disguised as inquiries. Would you say the J-6 is inferior to American designs? Hall paused. Inferior depends on what you measure. Performance, survivability, weapons capability. And how about cost? Maintenance? Production rate? Training requirement? Hall countered. Those matter too. The men exchanged glances. We want to make sure the final report reflects operational realities. Hall saw what they really meant. Don't embarrass anyone in Washington. He leaned forward, voice low but steady. Gentlemen, operational reality is exactly what I'm writing. The room stiffened. One officer gave a tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. We look forward to reviewing your conclusions. When they left, Hall realized his heart was pounding. This wasn't just a technical evaluation anymore. It was political dynamite. 2 nights later, Hall couldn't sleep. The monsoon hammered the roof like machine gun fire. He lit a small desk lamp and opened the logbook he had begun after his first flight. Pages filled with observations, sketches, diagrams. He added a new page titled, Operational Philosophy Analysis. And he wrote, American aircraft assume air superiority. They assume pristine runways, clean fuel, proper supply chains, and pilots with extensive training. The J-6 assumes none of that. He continued, its strength is not in winning every dogfight, but in being cheap enough and simple enough to field in huge numbers, constantly, relentlessly, until the enemy makes a mistake. It is war shaped into metal. He sat back. The thunderstorm outside rolled across the base like artillery. No wonder it's killing our pilots, he thought. They were trained for precision, facing enemies trained for persistence. The next morning, Hall received orders. You will perform one high-risk evaluation, low-altitude maneuvering, maximum aggression profile. He understood the meaning. A Phantom shot down at tree level had its wreckage photographed by recon. The angles suggested it had been cornered by a J-6 in dense terrain. They wanted to know if that was possible. At 0600, Hall climbed into the cockpit. Fog veiled the runway. Dew gleamed on the wings. He started the engines. They roared like twin furnaces. Lantern 1, winds calm. You are cleared. He took off. At 500 feet, he pushed lower. 300. 200. Treetops blurred. He switched to gunsight mode, though there were no rounds loaded. His world became a narrow green tunnel through the jungle canopy. The J-6 thrived here. The vibrations softened. The engines felt eager. Hall whispered, "This is where you hunt, isn't it?" Suddenly, a flock of birds burst upward. Instinctively, Hall yanked left, too hard. The jet snapped 40 degrees in a blink. The wings screamed. The G-force crushed him. The altimeter dropped dangerously. 200 feet. 180. 150. He steadied the stick, heart pounding. The J-6 hadn't betrayed him, but it demanded absolute obedience. In that moment, he understood the kill photos. Under a skilled pilot, this aircraft was a predator at low altitude. Under a novice, it was a suicide note. Hall climbed, breath shaking. He filed the last line of his mental report. The J-6 was designed to exploit recklessness. And in Vietnam, recklessness is currency. When he landed, the colonel met him at the ladder. "Well," Hall removed his helmet. "Sir, the North Vietnamese are using it exactly as intended. Fast, low, brutal. It's not a dogfighter. It's an ambusher." The colonel's eyes darkened. "And can we counter it?" Hall hesitated. "Only if we understand it. And right now, our doctrine doesn't." The colonel exhaled slowly. "That's what I was afraid you'd say." That evening, Hall finally began writing the main body of the Iron Lantern report. His hand trembled slightly as he wrote the first lines. The J-6 is not dangerous because it is superior. It is dangerous because it is sufficient. He paused. Outside, a squadron of phantoms screamed into the sky. He prayed they'd come back. Then he kept writing. By late May, the situation at Da Nang changed. More J-6 sightings. More close-range gun kills. More American pilots insisting they had been ambushed by aircraft they never saw. And now command wanted answers. Answers only Hall could provide. He was summoned to a briefing room that looked as if it had been assembled by bored contractors using leftover plywood and a single roll of duct tape. 6 senior officers waited inside. Their crisp uniforms contrasted sharply with the mud-streaked boots of the pilots outside. Brigadier General Stanton, a man with a face carved from granite, gestured for Hall to begin. Hall connected a projector. The machine hummed as the first slide appeared. J-6 Structural and Flight Evaluation Summary. He cleared his throat. "Gentlemen, I'll start with the short version. The J-6 is not a refined aircraft. It's not advanced. It's not elegant. But in the conditions of this war, steep terrain, primitive runways, poor visibility, short-range engagements, it's incredibly effective." Several officers shifted uncomfortably. Hall clicked to the next slide. Grainy photographs of the cockpit, crude welds, hand-painted gauges. "Look at this. No redundancy. No complex avionics. No weight wasted on systems that can fail under fire. Everything in this jet serves a single purpose: close-range interception. It climbs fast, dives even faster, and survives brutal low-altitude maneuvering." A colonel scowled. "It's an obsolete design." Hall met his gaze. "Obsolete doesn't matter when it kills modern aircraft." Silence washed through the room. He continued. "The J-6 thrives in conditions we avoid. Its engines spool instantly. Its controls respond violently. Pilots with just 150 hours can use it effectively because there's nothing to manage, no radar to interpret, no missile modes to configure, no computer logic to outrun." Hall changed the slide again. A gun camera frame from a J-6, the outline of a Phantom's vertical stabilizer filling the crosshairs. Meanwhile, our aircraft and pilots have to manage radar locks, countermeasures, ECM pods, and SAM evasion. In a knife fight, that complexity works against us. General Stanton leaned forward. "What's your recommendation, Captain Hall?" Hall inhaled. "We must adapt our tactics. Fight the enemy we have, not the one we expect. Engage J-6 outside gun range. Never merge if we can avoid it. And we must train our pilots to recognize the signs of low-altitude ambush patterns." A colonel scoffed. "So what you're saying is we shouldn't play their game?" "No," Hall replied. "I'm saying we've already been playing their game without realizing it." That line landed like a missile. After the briefing, Hall stepped outside. The runway glistened after fresh rainfall. AC-130 rumbled down the strip, engines coughing through humidity. Hall spotted Major Collins leaning against a sandbag wall, smoking. The red-haired pilot approached. "How'd the brass take it?" Collins asked. "They didn't throw me into the ocean. So that's something." You tell him the J-6 is practically a lawnmower with wings. I told them it's a lawnmower that's killed too many good men. Collins exhaled smoke toward the dark clouds. Dave used to say war is just two people trying to outguess each other until one guesses wrong. He paused. Looks like we've been guessing wrong. Hall didn't answer. 3 days later, Hall was invited, ordered, really, to accompany a phantom crew on an observation sortie. His job was to watch, document, and confirm in real combat what he had discovered in tests. The crew was young, maybe too young. Lieutenant Parker, the pilot, had the calm grin of someone who didn't yet believe the war could touch him. His backseater, Ramirez, was quieter, sharp-eyed. Captain Hall, Parker said, I hear you've been dancing with Chinese hardware. I wouldn't call it dancing, Hall said. It's more like wrestling a bull that's also on fire. Parker laughed. How bad can it be? Hall didn't smile. You'll find out if we're unlucky today. They launched at 0900. The sky was unusually clear. The earth below looked almost peaceful, a lie whispered by altitude. They flew north, skirting SAM engagement zones. Radio chatter was thick with warnings. At 12,000 feet, Ramirez spoke. Unknown radar hit. Low. Very low. Might be nothing. But Hall knew better. He recognized the signature. Small cross-section, erratic reflection. He closed his eyes. That's not nothing, he whispered. Parker banked the jet left, sweeping the valley below. The floor of the jungle canopy erupted. Just a flicker, a glint of metal, a brief flash like sunlight on steel. And then the telltale smoke trail of twin turbojets clawing upward. A J-6. It came like a thrown spear. No hesitation, no probing. Straight for the Phantom. Parker swore and pulled hard into a climbing brake. The Phantom groaned under the strain. Hall gritted his teeth. This is exactly the ambush profile I warned them about. The J-6 soared past their belly, missing by mere meters, then snapped into a vicious turn. It shouldn't have been able to turn that hard without shedding wings. But it did. Jesus, Ramirez shouted. That thing's on us. Hall forced his voice to stay calm. He's committing to guns. Don't fight horizontal. Go vertical. Parker pulled up. The J-6 tried to follow. It followed too well. Ramirez dumped countermeasures. Parker yelled. That won't do much, Hall muttered. He's not using radar or missiles. He's flying by instinct. The J-6 slipped under them, then shot upward again, accelerating through its own turbulence. Hall watched its movement closely. Every jolt, every twitch, every aggression pattern. Turn right. Now, Parker obeyed without question. The J-6 overshot by inches. For a split second, Hall saw the pilot through the canopy. Young, lean, jaw clenched, flying with ferocity rather than finesse. The J-6 rolled to re-engage. Don't dogfight him, Hall warned. Use your weight. Extend. Parker lit the burners. The Phantom surged forward like a kicked beast. The J-6 followed. But it was struggling now, too fast, too low, pushing its limits. Hall watched the tiny jet wobble. The pilot fought it. But physics won. The J-6 rolled, dipped a wing, clipped treetops, and vanished in an eruption of green and black. Silence filled the cockpit. Parker exhaled shakily. Did we get him? No, Hall said quietly. He got himself. Back at base, after debriefing, Hall walked alone across the tarmac. He wasn't thinking about victory. He wasn't thinking about statistics. He was thinking about the young North Vietnamese pilot he'd seen for one heartbeat. The determination, the desperation, the absolute commitment. He stopped near the hangar where the captured J-6 sat waiting for his next evaluation flight. Rain began to fall, gentle at first, then harder. Hall approached the weathered aircraft, running a hand along its battered fuselage. You did what you were built to do, he whispered. Fly fast. Fight close. Die if necessary. He stepped back, staring at the small jet. And that's why you're dangerous. That night, Hall finished the final page of the Iron Lantern report. The conclusion read, the J-6 is not a machine built for glory. It is built for attrition. It does not win through superiority. It wins through persistence, simplicity, and the ability to fight under conditions where our aircraft and our doctrine suffer. If we fail to learn from it, the cost will be measured in lives, not pride. He closed the folder. He didn't know if anyone would read it. He didn't know if anyone would listen. But he had written the truth. Weeks later, Hall prepared to leave Vietnam. His orders were vague: debriefings back home, more tests, maybe even a classified program. He packed slowly, methodically. Before boarding the transport plane, he walked once more past the J-6. Mechanics had tarped it, planning to ship it to a stateside test facility. He placed a palm on the tarp, feeling the cold outline of the canopy beneath. "You taught me something," he murmured. "War isn't won by the best machine. It's won by the machine that still flies when everything else breaks." He stepped back. AC-141 transport waited, engines humming. Hall took one last look at the captured fighter, the crude, brilliant, terrifying symbol of a philosophy America had underestimated. A philosophy forged not from superiority, but from survival. Then he turned and boarded the plane. The ramp closed. The aircraft lifted off. Vietnam shrank beneath him, and Project Iron Lantern became a classified chapter in a war full of miscalculations, bravery, and lessons written in fire.